President Donald Trump has pardoned 4 former government contractors convicted by a jury of killing over a dozen unarmed Iraqi civilians in 2007. Brigida Santos joins me now to talk about that story. Brigida, what company did these contracts? Who did they work for, and what crimes did a jury look at? This wasn't a, they had all the evidence in front of them. A jury looked at the facts and they said, yeah, they convicted them. So give me the background on this a little bit.
Sure. Well, at the time, the contractors were working for Blackwater, which is the private military security firm founded by Erik Prince, brother of U.S. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. 3 of the Blackwater guards were sentenced to 30 years in prison, and a 4th received a life sentence, each for their roles in killing 14 unarmed Iraqi civilians and injuring 17 others. Their actions against civilians, murder and voluntary and attempted manslaughter, are war crimes. The Nisour Square massacre sparked international outrage over the use of private mercenaries in war, but that didn't stop the U.S. government from paying Blackwater over $1 billion to protect U.S. interests anyway, or now from pardoning these mass killers.
How has the United Nations, I mean, they must be just outraged, but how have they responded to these pardons? I mean, when you look at the facts, we don't have time to go through all the intricacy of the facts, but it was, the defense was, gee whiz, it was exigent circumstances. We had to respond quickly, and they didn't. It was clearly murder. But how is the UN responding to these pardons?
Well, a group of United Nations experts with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights have issued the following statement. They say, quote, the Geneva Conventions oblige states to hold war criminals accountable for their crimes, even when they act as private security contractors. These pardons violate U.S. obligations under international law and broadly undermine humanitarian law and human rights at a global level. The UN experts are now calling on all parties to the Geneva Conventions to condemn President Trump's pardons.
Well, you know, the ugliest part about it is there's so many of these contractors and so many soldiers over there play completely by the rules. These folks were put under the same conditions that so many American troops are put under. And, you know, you don't hear these kinds of stories taking place every day. It's not like this was so exceptional. It was fairly normal. It's what the typical American soldiers confronted with when they're in a situation like that, or typical contractors confronted with. So people that are saying, oh, gee whiz, this was just an exceptional circumstance, take a look at the facts before you go there. The U.S. increasingly outsources military operations to the private sector. And I'm wondering, has this affected the trend? When did this trend start?
Well, this has been going on for a really long time. You know, the Nisour Square massacre took place during the presidency of George W. Bush. And since then, the trend of relying on private defense contractors in war zones has only continued. Back in 2016, under President Obama, more private military contractors died in Iraq and Afghanistan than all U.S. troops deployed to those countries, which basically means that mercenaries were the silent majority of the military at that time. And during the first quarter of fiscal year 2020 under President Trump, U.S. Central Command has reported over 50,000 contractors in the U.S. CENTCOM area of responsibility. You know, it's no secret that Erik Prince has been behind the scenes working as an unofficial figure in the Trump administration, where he's been recommending that the U.S. replace its military troops with paid private contractors in Syria and Afghanistan. So we really can't be fooled when President Trump says he's bringing home the troops. U.S. wars are not over. They're going corporate. And what we're seeing with this perfect example is that by outsourcing military operations, the U.S. can basically circumvent its obligations to follow international laws and treaties. That's what we saw here.
Yeah, and these folks are paid 10 times what the typical trooper over there that has to, you know, the same soldier has to confront the same situation. These folks are paid 10 times as much. And you don't hear stories like this every day. This is not the norm. Take a look at I mean, if you have any doubts, take a look at the facts behind this story, and it's very, very troublesome. Thank you for joining me. A popular catheter used to remove blood clots has been voluntarily recalled by its maker due to the increased risk of accidental deaths. I don't know that they're accidental anymore. This company's known plenty about this. I have Becca Timmons with me, who's handling these cases. Becca, you know, first of all, what grabbed me about this story is we always see the company and say, in trial, say, well, we voluntarily pulled it off. That's not exactly right. The FDA in this point, in this particular case, discovered the problem. They talked about the problem. They saw many, many events. But why did this have to be pulled off the market?
So at bottom, this is a device that is used to remove blood clots from the brain. It's a tiny vacuum that's inserted into the vessels in the brain, and using suction removes the clot. Almost right away, it was approved in July 2019. Almost immediately, adverse event reports were pouring into the FDA.
People dying.
People dying on the table. Essentially, when the catheter is inside the vessel in the brain, it would expand rapidly and violently, causing the blood vessel to rupture, resulting in massive hemorrhage and death.
Well, actually, the tip of the device would actually break off, and it would actually cause the vessel to erupt. Also, there are several problems with this, and the point is that the most bothersome thing about this is that they've got other things they can use for ischemic stroke. I mean, ischemic stroke. You've got many things that can be done besides this device. This device was a jazzy new thing to sell, wasn't it?
Right. The treatment options were either TPA, which is a clot-busting drug that's injected into the vessel by your interventional radiologist, and then the mechanical thrombectomy using a stent retrieval system was sort of the standard. And then in 2007, this company, Penumbra, developed this aspiration thrombectomy technique, and there was a consensus emerging that this was the superior method, and the company decided to capitalize further on this success, and this was the 8th generation device, and obviously it has some very horrendous defects.
Well, but it's particularly for the ischemic stroke. Is that right? That's typically where they're going to use it?
Right. This is indicated in cases of ischemic stroke.
So this is the same company, though, that my memory is they had problems with another device that they were also involved with at some point, where that device was also causing death. That was a few years ago. And so they're back into the market. They're trying to make it sound like, well, we pulled it out voluntarily. Here's what they knew. They knew they had 18 deaths. And if they reported 18 deaths, more than likely, there's many, many more. Underreporting and this type of thing is very common. And they had 50 injuries that they reported, and we know that. That's probably underreported too. So pick up with the idea with somebody presents with ischemic stroke, it's not like you have to have this to live. This is not a necessary medical device, is it?
Right, there are other treatment options available. This was kind of the cutting edge, vanguard protocol that was just recently emerging in the last 15 or so years, but there are several other treatment options available.
Well, what did the FDA do when people started dying, when the injuries started showing up? Did they take immediate action, or did they lag behind like they usually do, sometimes for years before they go, oh, well, God, maybe we ought to say something or do something?
So the device was approved in July 2019, and then, as I said before, right away, issues started coming up, injuries, deaths. So in July 2020, FDA came out and said, all right, we need to modify a warning, because every time not every time, but frequently when an interventional radiologist injects dye into the device, there's a failure. So they put a warning on there, warning physicians, hey, don't put contrast through this device, it will rupture. So that was in July 2020. But
well, shouldn't they have pulled it then rather than just, that's a meaningless warning. It's a meaningless warning unless the doctor knows what the cause of the failure is, right?
Right. So, as we saw after that warning came out, these events continued to happen. And it wasn't until nearly 6 months later that FDA said, all right, enough is enough. They pulled the device.
Okay, this is Penumbra, right?
Right.
The company's Penumbra. What should people do if they feel like they've been affected by it?
So our firm is investigating these claims. We're investigating the company as well, the manufacturer and the device itself. So if someone believes that they or a loved one were injured during aspiration thrombectomy using this device, they should reach out to an attorney. We're evaluating these cases and to see if there's a viable option to litigate and potentially recover for these people.
Yeah, you're looking at the cover-up too, aren't you? You're looking at Penumbra's cover-up. I think is going to be a vital part of the case.
I think fact discovery is going to be very interesting in this case.
Yeah. Becca, thank you for joining me, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.